Actually, I grew up in small towns around the country. I was born in Illinois, and I lived in Iowa and Maine and North Carolina. My first instrument was actually the piano. I started playing piano when I was quite young, and I started doing, like competitions or different sorts of adjudicated piano events, even I think before I was in school. So when I was really kind of like too young to know any better. So I didn't really feel nervous about it because it was just kind of, I was a little kid. That's what I did. And then my older brother started playing trumpet, and I fell in love with the trumpet. And so even before I was old enough to start band, at my school you could start band in 5th grade. But my brother taught me some trumpet before I was old enough to start band. And so again, throughout middle school, high school, even college, my experience with performance anxiety was fairly minimal. I certainly felt nervous and excited about performances, but never anything crippling or debilitating. I was still able to perform. And then in 1991, after I graduated college, back in the dark ages, I moved to Russia, and I played in a professional orchestra there. Everything was still okay. Long story short, when I was 28 years old, I moved back and I started graduate school at a place called the Eastman School of Music. And it was a very intense environment. I was surrounded by incredible musicians and trumpet players, most of whom were several years younger than me. And the demands were pretty intense. I was expected to perform a concerto or a sonata with piano accompaniment every week for the whole trumpet studio. And these were great players. And that was the point where performance anxiety became a huge issue for me. And I worked through it for the next couple of years. So that's kind of my experience with performance anxiety. I have 4, arguably 5 basic strategies that I want to share with you for addressing performance anxiety. So the first one is just kind of understanding what's going on physically and cognitively when we feel these symptoms. So I'm calling this understanding and regulating the fight, flight, or freeze response. You might have just heard it called fight or flight before. So when we feel nervous or anxious about playing our instruments, and by the way, how many of you, do you find it's worse when you're playing a solo versus playing in an ensemble? Most of you? I think a lot of people find the anxiety much worse when they're playing solo. And then these days, there's also the question of recording versus live performance. I think some people get more anxiety about live performances. I personally feel much more anxiety about recording. I do not like recording. So everybody's different in that way. But this basic fight or flight response is designed to protect us, to keep us safe. So if you go back and think about those various symptoms we were talking about, not being able to fall asleep. I don't know if anybody actually said that one, but that's a big one for me. The night before a performance, I find it very difficult to fall asleep. Well, think about it. If you actually were being, say, attacked by a wild animal or another person, you would want that hyper alert state of mind where you don't fall asleep, because that might save your life, right? If you fall asleep, you might be attacked. That feeling of butterflies in your stomach or sort of a stomach upset. Again, if you think about being physically threatened, the last thing you're going to want to do is stop and have a snack if you're being chased by a predator, right? So our digestive system sends us cues not to eat, not to get hungry, and we experience that sometimes as nausea or that kind of butterflies in our stomach. Many of the symptoms, the accelerated pulse. Sometimes I get like blotchy, like it almost looks like I'm blushing, or I have hives or something on my face and my neck, that redness. My breathing becomes more shallow. It moves from like a low belly breath to more of a upper chest breath, and it gets more rapid. All these things are what's called the sympathetic nerve system, which pumps two hormones into our body. They're called adrenaline and noradrenaline. Those are the main ones. And both of them sort of prime our muscles and our respiratory system, so we have a burst of energy. We can run. You've probably heard stories of like in a car accident or something like that, where people get this almost superhuman strength and they can lift a car off someone. That's the power of adrenaline. It sort of primes your muscles and your respiratory system to be hyper activated. Great thing if you're being chased by a cheetah, not a great thing if you're giving a flute recital, right? Like, we're not actually in danger. Also, the dry mouth that we experience as brass players, if you were hiding from a predator, the last thing you would want to do is cough, right? Or sneeze. And so we stop salivating. If you ever notice when you're in a situation where you're feeling nervous and anxious, you won't cough. It absolutely won't happen because your mouth stops salivating. So that's kind of the sympathetic nerve system. And that's why we feel those various symptoms when we're nervous. And also the one about sort of blacking out and losing mental focus. If you think about animals, prey animals, some of them will also play dead. They actually just like lie down and are almost in a state like they're unconscious. That's the freeze part of the fight, flight, or freeze. And we experience that as well. And sometimes that sort of mentally blacking out or becoming hazy is part of that freeze response. So in addition to this sympathetic nerve system, we also have what's called a parasympathetic nerve system, which does the opposite. So the parasympathetic nerve system can calm some of these things. It can slow the pulse. It can deepen the breath. Can anybody think, and I'll pop into the chat here, can anybody think of anything that you can do to stimulate the parasympathetic nerve system? In other words, anything you can do that sort of makes you feel more calm or relaxed? I'm looking in. Yeah, deep breaths, absolutely. That's one of the best ones. Anything else anyone does to calm yourself? Clearing your mind, so kind of meditating. So this is the parasympathetic nerve system. And you guys were typing some good ideas about deep breathing. What about touch, like massage and things like that? Empty brain. Yeah, just sort of reframing things. Eating dark chocolate, you can never go wrong with that. Hanging out with friends, absolutely. So laughter. If you have any of you, like right before a concert, maybe on the other side of the curtain from the audience, your director maybe makes kind of a funny little comment or a little joke, and everybody laughs a little bit, and you notice like that sort of eases that tension. Laughter for sure can stimulate the parasympathetic nerve system. Singing can stimulate it. Sometimes picturing various scenes or objects, especially from the natural world. So for me, like if I picture sort of a babbling brook through the woods or a clear blue sky, and I kind of imagine the clouds just sort of drifting out until it's just a perfect clear blue sky. So different kinds of images, or what's called creative visualization. Let's go back to the idea of deep breathing. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second, and I want everybody to try something with me. We're just going to take I see my hand is up. There we go. 3 really deep breaths. And I want you to do this with me. So we're going to think of breathing kind of from the belly. And on a count of 4, we're going to sort of feel the air filling up for 4 counts and then exhaling for 4 counts. So we're kind of breathing in length and then breathing out tension. So let's try that. I'm going to count. You're going to breathe. Here's our first breath. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It already feels better to me. Let's do one more breath. This time we're going to do 5 counts in. So lengthening. Think of us inhaling slowly and then exhaling softly for 5 counts. Let's try it. Ready? Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out. 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to take one last breath. This one's going to be 6 counts in, and then just let it all go on the exhalation. Here we go. Ready? Breathe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I don't know about you, but for me, in less than 30 seconds, by taking those 3 deep breaths, I can really pretty dramatically change both my mental state and my physical state. And that's actually the first thing I do every day when I practice, is I take 3 slow, deep breaths. And I also like to do it before a performance. So we talked a little bit about the sympathetic nerve system and the parasympathetic nerve system. Let me go back to my slides here. There's a person taking some deep breaths. Our second strategy, programming, choosing the right music to play. So I think to overcome performance anxiety, it's really helpful to program music, and I'm talking both to the educators here and to the players and students here, music that's pretty safely within your comfort zone. If you program music that's at the absolute edges of your technical abilities, there definitely is a place for practicing music like that and for playing and even performing music like that. But I think the time to do that would not be when you're working on performance anxiety. What you really want to do is play music that you feel comfortable with, maybe an old favorite, something that you've played before and that you're very familiar with and you just enjoy playing, and maybe play that in front of an audience. I think we want to build up kind of 3 to 5 very positive, confidence building performance experiences. And then we can look at kind of stretching the limits of technique a little bit more in a performance. I would say you also should choose music that you find beautiful or powerful or emotionally moving in some way. For me, as a performer, if I'm playing a piece that's really just about technique, I get much more nervous than if I'm playing a piece where I feel like I'm almost like just the medium between the composer and the audience. It's not really about me, the performer. I'm the vehicle. There's this incredible piece of music or moving piece of music that I want to share with the audience. So it's kind of moving from the composer through me to the audience. Maybe I'll play just a tiny bit for you. I just had a performance yesterday of a piece it's very, very technical, but I love the fact that at the beginning of it, it starts out well within my comfort zone, and it's got like just a certain emotional intensity that I think about that rather than the technique. I'll play a little bit of it for you. That very opening, it's kind of in a really comfortable range, and it's got a little sort of drama or emotional drive. So even though it's a technical piece, I chose it because it's got a certain power or emotion to it that is really helpful for me. Let's see, what else about choosing music? Set yourself up for positive experiences, as I said, for the first, especially early on when you're addressing performance anxiety before you program really challenging pieces. I like to say a simple piece of music performed beautifully is beautiful, right? A difficult piece of music performed sloppily is sloppy. So I would rather play beautiful than play sloppy. I don't think it's really about like playing the hardest piece that you can all of the time. For sure, there's a place for stretching your technique and growth. I also want to address the 10 penny technique. On my music stand, I always keep 10 pennies there. And this actually has to do more with my third strategy. Let's see if my slides will go. There we go. Over prepare and prepare early. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the way the 10 penny technique works is if there's a difficult passage for you or directors, this would be for your ensemble as well. I like to stack up 10 pennies, and I'll take a very short passage. It might even just be a measure or something like that. And if I play it once up to my own standard of what's acceptable, then I move 1 penny into the other pile, okay? And then if I play it again well enough, perfect, or up to my standards, I move 2. The trick is, if you do it 9 times right, and then on the 10th time you miss it, all the pennies go back into the first pile and you start over again. The reason for this is I think it's human nature. We might miss a passage 10 times, 15 times, and then we get it right once and we're like, woohoo, I got it. I'm ready to go on. No, you don't, right? The chances are still, 15 out of 16 times you've missed it. The odds are stacked against you. If you then go out and perform it, you're much more likely to miss that passage than to hit it. But I feel like if you can do it 10 times in a row, then the odds are fairly good that you're gonna get it right. Let's move on to this over prepare and prepare early. I think the best antidote to performance anxiety is preparation. Number one best approach. So why do I say over prepare? Because there is no such thing. You can't be too prepared for a performance, in my opinion. And I think how many of you, let me just kind of see, let me put my thing on gallery. General show of hands, how many of you have gotten to work with like really amazing musicians, like some of your heroes before? I think world-class musicians tend to sort of create this illusion that things are effortless, right? And they sort of keep that protected because as audience members, we like to be wowed. We like to see them and go, gosh, they can just pick up the horn and do these amazing things. They're geniuses. But if you actually work with them up close and you watch them closely, I think what you will see is that they are meticulous and methodical and thorough in their preparation and their time management. And they start preparing early. They may kind of try to hide that from you. They might keep it a little bit secret just how well prepared they are, because they want the audience to be able to feel, just the awe in what they're doing. But when you really watch their habits and how they prepare, they are incredibly well prepared. So one thing I would suggest, if you have a performance coming up, whether that's an audition for ILMEA or a college audition or a recital or really any type of a performance, is to sort of set a timeline working from the end back to the beginning. So if you have a performance coming up on February 15th, say, I would say try to have your program absolutely 100% performance ready 2 weeks in advance, and then back it up from there. So like if the performance is February 15th, that might mean that I need to be ready to perform it on February 1st. That might mean that on January 15th, I should be able to play long stretches of it without stopping. And by January 1st, I need to have woodshedded everything, rhythms and pitches. And so maybe it turns out December 1st is when I need to start working on the piece. And I sort of figure it out that way. Instead of just saying, I'm going to start today and see if I can get it done in time, I start at the finish and kind of work backwards and think about how long I need that way. I would suggest starting twice as slow as you think you need to. and doing twice as many repetitions as you think you need to. It will only make it better. Sometimes I like to keep a practice journal so that I can set some goals. It helps me be a little more emotionally distanced or objective about my practice. This is a big one, and it's a journey. It's not just a one-time thing. But try to work on not being too emotionally hard on yourself in your practicing. I always try to think of the feedback that I would give to a good friend or a student. So if Heidi said to me, Dr. Schuman, can I play this piece for you? I'm performing it next week and I want to get some practice playing it in front of somebody. I want to feel what it's like to be nervous in front of an audience. Can I play this for you? I would give her a certain sort of feedback. Maybe it wouldn't be perfect, but I'd say, well, Heidi, here's 3 things that I thought were really, really nice about that. And here are some things that I think you can continue to work on. And here's how I think you can get from where you are right now to an even higher level. So that's good feedback. How many of us really give ourselves that feedback? I know that a lot of times with myself, I'll just be like, oh, that was awful. I wouldn't say that to someone else. I wouldn't tell Heidi that was awful, right? I would say, here are the things that sound really good. Here are the things that need a little more work. And here's how we're going to address that. So I try and fail still. It's not like I have all the answers, but I try to give myself that same sort of objective, slightly emotionally distanced feedback about, okay, what are the good things? What are the things that need work? And how am I going to get the things that need work to a higher level? So that's a big one to work on. Practice journal, we talked about that. Practice performing. I think it's really important to play music in front of people before the actual performance. So, for example, if you have solo and ensemble coming up, maybe get a few of your other players from your section or from different instruments and play your solos for each other before you actually play them at solo and ensemble so that you get used to playing in front of people. And make sure it's a supportive group of people. I bet you your band director or ensemble director would be happy to listen to you if you ask and say, can I play my solo for you? I want to practice getting nervous. If all else fails, I will listen to you. Just send me an email and say, I need to play my upcoming audition piece for somebody. Will you listen to me? I'd be happy to do that. And I bet you there are other friends, family members around, music teachers who would be happy to listen to you as well. It feels really different. Even if you are practicing by yourself and you keep going all the way through like it's a performance, that feels really different than actually playing it for someone else. So I would encourage you to play it for someone else. I would encourage you to record yourself. I know it's brutal. I hate recording myself, but every time I do it, I learn something and I get better as a performer. Here's kind of a strange one. Experiment with playing by memory. Okay, so when I was in that master's program that I was talking about, and I started to have a real problem with performance anxiety, my teacher at that time, a guy named Charlie Geyer, made me start performing every week a memorized solo in front of people. And when he first did that, I thought he was being cruel. I thought, like, why is he doing this? Like, now I'm going to be even more nervous because I might have a memory slip. I might not even be able to remember what to play. But what I found was exactly the opposite. He was 100% right to make me do that, because what happens for me when I memorize a piece is 2 things. One is I have to be extremely well prepared, right? I have to do a lot of repetition and a lot of practice to get it to the point that I can play it by memory. And that's a good thing. But the second thing is it turns off like the little mental dialogue that when you're playing, when you're like, oh no, here comes the hard spot. Oh no, here it comes. Oh man, I just missed it. That was terrible. And you've got like sort of this running conversation with yourself in your head while you're playing. That's bad. That's a distraction. But when I'm playing by memory, Maybe this is just me, but there's just not space in my brain for that, right? Like if I'm playing by memory, I have to be in the moment. I have to be 100% immersed in the music, because I know that if I'm not, I'm going to have a memory slip. And so it actually makes me feel much less nervous to perform by memory, because I'm more absorbed in the moment as it goes by. So it's something to try out. This is another little tool that I use in preparing for a performance. If you can see this, starting all the way at the left of your screen, that would be, where's my cursor? There it is. That would be the first day that you start preparing for a performance. So you can see that on day one over here, almost 100% of your practice is below the diagonal line. In other words, almost everything you're doing is isolating short little sections, slowing them down, doing a lot of repetition. Okay, then as the days and weeks go by, we move to the right across your screen. So here we are, maybe a quarter of the way through your preparation. Now, most of your practice is still isolating the difficult spots, slowing them down, chunking them, doing repetition. But a little bit of your practice now, you're starting to run through longer portions of the piece without stopping. Then as you get about halfway through, you're doing about half and half. As you approach the day of the performance, you're doing more and more complete run-throughs of the piece without stopping, and just a little bit of that isolated practice, until by the day of the performance, you've played this piece straight through start to finish so many times that when you get up to perform it, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't stop. It feels like, oh yeah, this is what I've been doing for weeks. I know how to do this. I'm comfortable. Here I go again, just playing it straight through start to finish. So that's something to consider. Okay, strategy 4, rituals. Let's go back to our chat. Does anybody have a little ritual that they like to do? It could be something a little bit superstitious, like on the day of a performance or the hour of a performance or 10 seconds before a performance, like anything in the last 24 hours that you do that makes you feel more confident. Yeah, playing the 2 pieces that I've been playing so long, like tube and throat singing like the Tibetan monks. Wear the same socks. Yep. Eating. I'll tell you an interesting thing about rituals. And first of all, mine are, I like to eat a banana for breakfast. That's one of my rituals. And I like to do this thing called creative visualization, usually the night before, where I just sort of close my eyes in a quiet place and I imagine the entire performance from the moment I walk on stage through every detail, in as much detail as I can imagine it. And I imagine it going exactly the way I want to, how I'm going to bow, how I'm going to breathe, how I'm going to walk off stage. And that helps me feel just more relaxed. I also like to do a kind of specific warm-up routine that's kind of slow and relaxed. But let's talk about rituals. So some of these things: honk out a low note out of your bari sax, throat sing, I love that one. Play the song one time, question my life choices out loud, listen to music that makes you feel confident, do a shakeout, drink some water, panic, that might not be the best one. Here's the thing about these rituals. And before I tell you, I want to tell you a story about the astronaut Yuri Gagarin. Do you guys know who Yuri Gagarin is? So, by the way, I got this from a podcast. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to The Happiness Lab with Laurie Santos. She's a Yale psychologist who does this amazing podcast that I really like about happiness. Anyway, Yuri Gagarin was the first human being to go into outer space. So this is back during the Cold War. when there was kind of a space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Of course, we were the first, the United States were the first to go to the moon, but the Soviets were the first to send a human being into outer space. And that human being was Yuri Gagarin. And there's a kind of a funny, this is going to get a little bit gross here, so bear with me. But on the way out, as he was traveling in a van out to board the rocket to go into space, and this happens a lot. This is another way the body sort of becomes, like more activated when we're a little bit anxious. He was all dressed from head to toe in his space suit, which took like hours to put on. But as the van was driving out to the rocket, he had to use the bathroom. He had to go to the bathroom. And so the van stopped. I'm sorry if this is gross, but Gagarin actually urinated on the back tire of the van. Now, what's interesting about this is that literally every human space travel since then, the astronaut has urinated on the back wheel of a van. I am not kidding you. Not just Russian astronauts, American astronauts, astronauts from all over the world, because this flight was successful. So they developed this idea that it must be some sort of good luck ritual that you need to do before you go into space. Now, you know, and I know that has nothing to do with the mission being successful or not successful, right? Except that it does. And the way that it does is that if you believe a 4-leaf clover will bring you good luck, or if you believe urinating on the back wheel of a van will keep you safe, or if you believe that Russian astronauts also always are blessed by a Russian Orthodox priest before they have a mission. Astronauts have some of the most elaborate rituals. There's this whole thing where they flatten coins, like putting them under train tracks, things like that. Anyway, all these rituals, if you believe that they're going to protect you or bring you luck, then guess what? They stimulate the parasympathetic nerve system and make you feel more calm, and therefore probably actually do make you perform better, right? So rituals are not a bad thing. And another one, Beyonce, I mean, think it's bad enough for us, like being nervous playing, for an audience of a few hundred people or solo and ensemble or a college audition. But imagine Beyonce getting up there in front of hundreds of thousands of people. She has she listens to the same playlist, exact same sequence before every concert. She does the same stretches and she does an hour-long meditation. And that's her ritual. Whether or not that physically changes anything doesn't really matter, because she believes it does. It makes her feel more confident, and therefore she's more calm. So I actually think these kinds of rituals are basically a good thing. A few kind of final thoughts, and then I'll stick around for any questions that you guys have. One is, I find it kind of reassuring to think, again, that the performance is really not about me. I'm just sort of the medium that the music is traveling through to get to the audience. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that really what performing music should be about, rather than competition, is just sort of a way of connecting with other people and sharing something from inside yourself. Maybe helping your audience in some way, helping them to feel something, whether that's joy or whether it's pain or anger or something that they need to process, to feel. It's about kind of emotional vulnerability. And then you can read this quote here on the screen from Adam Rappa, great trumpet player. But I think it's a really great way to remember that ultimately it's about the journey and not just the one performance. It's about just sort of a lifetime of improving and working at these things and getting better at them. And I should explain why I put an apple down in the lower right corner. I will never forget hearing Phil Smith, who used to be the principal trumpeter of the New York Philharmonic. He's retired now. And his replacement was actually one of those trumpet players in my class at Eastman. But he was coaching a student, and the student was playing something pretty well, and then Phil Smith played it, and it was just like incredible. And I remember what he said. He said, I try to think of every note that I play as an apple. And it doesn't matter whether it's a whole note or one tiny little 30-second note in the middle of a run. I try to make every note I play the most beautiful, round, red apple, and I give it to my audience as a gift, every single note. And I thought, that's the difference. That's the difference between him and the rest of us, is every single note is the most beautiful gift that he can give to his audience. I think that's a great way to think about it. I suppose maybe a fifth strategy that I should address in this day and age is medication. And all I really will say about that is that that's a conversation you should have with a doctor. It's not, I know that when I was in college and school, there was a type of medication called beta blockers that actually, they halt this whole sympathetic nerve fight or flight response. And a lot of students and players would use those. I'm not really going to get into the moral issue of whether that's right or wrong, but I'll tell you what is wrong is to just like borrow someone else's, right? If that's something that you think you want to pursue, you should really have that conversation with your doctor and just be honest with them. Tell them what you're experiencing in terms of anxiety and ask if that's something that they think is a good idea for you to try. I mean, I think there may be a point in your development, and I would say, in my opinion, it wouldn't be before graduate school. So no one in undergraduate or high school or whatever probably wouldn't make sense. But there is a point where I think you've put so much into your music that you do really want to be able to, there is a little bit of a moral obligation to share that music with an audience. And if performance anxiety is preventing you from doing that, and medication can help you do that, I'm not gonna say that there's never a situation where that might be the right answer. It's just it's a conversation you should have with your doctor.